We are back in the black hole of real estate, and we are in this conversation right now about things about inflation and the cost of rentals and how it's less affordable for many people. But there's an interesting twist to it, and I want to talk about that today. This is your host, Ron Wysakarski, for the black hole of real estate. In the rental market, this is really a lose-lose for both sides right now. Admittedly, it's expensive to rent right now, and for years, the cost of home ownership was less than renting. But not everybody has the down payment or the credit, the closing cost money, or the desire to own their own home. So there's been this interesting dynamic for many, many years that the cost of owning a home is less than renting. Now, with the interest rates higher, it's evening that out, but with inflation pressure from the last few years on every market, right down to the eggs you're trying to buy, it's expensive to rent, and there's less available money to put towards food and shelter because everything costs more right now. And you're thinking, all right, so how do we combat this? Well, the interesting twist is that the homeowners, the landlords, they're also having a hard time right now. And what they're experiencing is not unlike what the renters are. And this is the lose-lose proposition that is in front of everybody right now. You see, for those that own a property, the taxes on the property have gone up. In many areas, the insurance is 1.5 to 2 times what it was. When there's a repair, the cost of lumber is exponentially higher. The cost of parts is also very high. And labor has gone through the roof. And if you're in an area that was affected by hurricanes like the market that I'm in, then you've got unbelievable amount of repairs on some of these properties, some of them catastrophic damage. And if you're having to move out a tenant or relocate a tenant temporarily and you're not receiving rent and you've also got to repair a home, the expenses that are mounting, well, they could feel insurmountable for the owner of the property. And as you layer in all these additional expenses to owning the property, and you factor in that while rents are high, in many cases, the rent is actually the same or lower than it was last year. So the renters feel a squeeze, but the owners are also feeling a squeeze as well. And if you were to take an even deeper look into this, what you're finding right now is that a lot of people are renewing their leases. A big reason is that most landlords are keeping the rent pretty much the same, minimal increase, in order to keep the tenant in place and to not have a month of vacancy. For the tenant, it's expensive to move. It's disruptive. You've got to take time off from work or use up all of your free time nights and weekends. You got to pay for moving trucks. You definitely have to change your driver's license and your bank account information and pretty much anything that utilities. It all needs to be changed. There's new security deposits sometimes, a new school bus run or new school district. There is a lot of discomfort in moving. So when we're in a situation such that we're in right now, if the money is about the same each month for the renter, they're probably staying as long as the home is reasonably kept, well kept. They're probably staying to keep costs in line and not take on another couple $1,000s or whatever it might be to move and all that disruption. So the landlord also avoiding that monthly loss. If it's a $2,000 rental and the tenant moves out, you're probably not renting it the next day. Let's just assume for a moment that you're going to lose $2,000 in rent. There may be some additional costs to get the property rent ready. But in our ideal circumstances, you're probably losing $2,000. So with the temptation to increase the rent $50 to make 600 while risking, because $50 times 12 months, that's $600. But if the property is vacant for a month and you lose $2,000, let's say congratulations, you bump up the rate $50 a month and made it more expensive and harder to find a tenant. And by the way, the $600 extra that you got finally is washed out by the $2,000 you lost. You're out $1,400. So yes, you raised the rent. Yes, you had a vacancy. So no, you didn't make a profit. You actually lost $1,400. For this reason, most landlords are being counseled or reading the tea leaves. This is not a market where rents are likely to go up very much, if at all, because some renters have options right now. The landlords do know that most renters are averse to moving if things are close. Very few are jacking up the rent, as they say, really, really high right now, because I think both sides somewhat need each other right now. A good place to live, where someone is comfortable and not disrupting their lives and spending a lot of money to move to some other place, which might be an unknown, could have different set of circumstances or problems. And for the owner, they also know if the tenant's been paying on time, that might be the safer bet. So the marriage of conveniences, I think a lot of people are actually just going to stay where they are this year. Is the cost of renting high? Relatively speaking, everything is high right now. Everything is expensive. There's nothing that you can buy right now that was much, lower price than last year or the year before. Very few things. I'm sure there's something we could find. But in this market that we're in right now, I think what you'll find is most people will stay where they are. Most landlords will keep their properties. The sales prices they're getting right now, unless they have a compelling reason to sell, and something else they're going to buy, a different investment, maybe, or just cashing out. Beyond that, most people are just hanging on for another year and kicking the can down the road. And I think it's okay. So if you're renting the property that you live in, it's all right. It's going to cost about the same this year. I would expect a little bump in the price next year across the board, but maybe not this year. And it might give you some time to either save or make some choice to do something a little bit differently over the next year. I think the landlords are the sellers surviving this year and not going in the tank and losing a bunch of money and keeping the property stable. At the very least, if there's a mortgage, then the balance will be lower next year because the payments made this year, and that extra payment might add up over time. So it's an interesting thing to watch when we hear and see the reactions of people talking about the cost of rent. It's super expensive, and I will just answer with everything is. If there is a way that someone could purchase a home and save the down payment, save the money for closing costs, get their credit score and profile to an acceptable level, and have the debt-to-income ratio covered, I think it's great to consider buying a home if that's something that you want. I can tell you there's been times in my professional career where I had sports bars and restaurants. I just needed a crash pad. The last thing I needed was yard work when I'm working 7 days a week. So there's reasons, really good reasons, why people choose just to lease out a property for a period of time. And I hope that this gives some thought and consideration. Is the cost of renting high? I think it depends. And the easy answer is yes. But when we examine all the reasons behind it, it might be right-sized to the renter's budget to just rent. And it might be less expensive over the short term to not own a property. Some people are getting hit with really big bills right now for a new roof, a new HVAC, water heaters, plumbing, electrical. These things are all super expensive. And if you purchase a home and those things hit you in the first couple of years, you could be in a tough situation, and renting might actually look kind of good when you're in those moments. All right, this is your host, Ron Wysakarski. Hope you enjoyed this show. This is the Black Hole of Real Estate.